What's up?
All right, so for those of you wondering, what is this show going to be about? It has nothing to do with the movie. In fact, it is not even Hollywood themed. The Minority Report is just the perspective of two minorities, myself, Sebastian Sanchez, and Bobby Slaughter. Bobby, why don't you tell a little bit about the people, who you are, and what's your background?
All right. Glad to be here. Thank you, Sebastian. Again, he said my name is Bobby Slaughter. It's actually, I go by comedian Bobby G. Slaughter. I am here in Las Vegas doing Slaughter Comedy. I've been doing promotions and comedy since 2015. Before that, I was in the United States Air Force for 20 years.
Quite a background.
Yeah. Well, I'm an old guy. That's the big difference with Sanchez and Slaughter. He's bringing you the younger perspective, and I'm bringing you the baby boomer perspective of what we now call okay boomers.
Now, here's the thing. Bobby might seem slightly older than myself, but I would say I'm probably the older one of the two of us, considering you offer a much more fresh perspective to some takes than I do. So I met Bobby actually doing stand-up comedy. Unlike Bobby, I am not a military veteran. He actually works for the Department of Defense. He's got a legitimate job, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
I'm actually a full-time teacher by trade. I've been teaching 10 years in the public school system, and my story is that of a immigrant. I was an illegal immigrant for many, many years. In fact, I still feel like one, and at times I get hungry like one. Bobby, on the other hand, had his own struggles, and the whole point of the show is to promote some of the good habits we developed along the way to overcome our obstacles and our struggle out of poverty. And we want to share some good habits with most of you. So, Bobby, let me ask you something. Growing up, where did you exactly grow up?
Unfortunately, Jackson, Mississippi.
Wow, I apologize.
Yeah, me too. I'm still trying to get over that I grew up in the South.
I'm sorry for you on behalf of the entire United States, especially the southern states.
Right.
How was growing up in Jackson?
Well, at the time, I thought it was okay until I kept seeing movies about Mississippi, and I was like, Mississippi burning, Mississippi this, Mississippi that. And I started to realize there's something really negative going on in Mississippi.
That place was on fire.
Yeah, it was. And I was glad to get out of there once I turned 17.
So how did you get out of there?
I joined the United States Air Force. I was originally planning to go to college. Had a partial scholarship, but like I said, it was just something gnawing me that I needed to leave.
And when you left, where did they station you first?
Tucson, Arizona.
So you left the burning Mississippi to hot-ass Arizona.
That's right. And that's the first time I actually saw an authentic Hispanic person. Before then, all of the Hispanic people I saw on TV, I believe, were actually white.
You know, it's funny you say that because the first time I saw a black person, I can trace it to the day. It was February 24th, 1992.
He knows the date.
Yes, this was a shock to me because we had migrated from a very far country called Chile. And Chile is in very, very far South America. It's the furthest country you can get going south before you run into Antarctica. And over there, we had not yet ever experienced life with any black culture for the simple reason that slavery never expanded to Chile.
Wow.
It expanded to the neighboring countries. So, for example, Peru is right above Chile, and they got a bunch of slavery influx. And so did Brazil, so did Colombia. But Chile was just too far, and they couldn't get around going through the Atlantic into the Pacific, so they just figured, why bother? And this is before social media, before the internet. So you didn't really see things unless it was on TV.
So that means I may never meet a black Sanchez.
Oh, on contrary, there are tons of them.
What?
Yes. Oh my God. Let me tell you, man. Here's what people don't know. There are more black people in Brazil than the entire United States and Caribbean combined. In fact, Brazil has the most black people outside of Africa, with the exception of one country. Nigeria is the only country that has more black people in one country than Brazil.
Okay, so how's that possible?
Well, this is the slave trade. When the slave trade happened, there were multiple ships going to multiple destinations.
That's right.
So you had the Portuguese competing with the Spanish, and you had Britain try to get in on it. The French got in on it. The Dutch got in on it. Even the Italians tried it, but they failed. So they all sent what they considered their investments at the time, from their perspective, obviously, to their new prospective colonies.
Wow.
Now, most of them actually didn't come to the U.S., contrary to popular belief. And the ones that did all came in through Columbia and Charleston, South Carolina.
Wow.
So you can probably trace a relative to South Carolina.
Wow, that's interesting. So with that, how did you migrate from Chile to here?
Well, we were running away from two problems. One, the terrible economy, and a terrible father. So my mom, it was her. She married a guy. Now I don't mean to speak poorly of him. He tried his best, but he was actually a very well established singer in the 1960s. So he was the equivalent of, he was like our country's Frank Sinatra for about maybe 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
And then music, as you know, evolves, and then new genres come and go. And once you're no longer relevant, even Sinatra experienced this, even though he made all this money and he arguably could be the king of Las Vegas.
Right.
But eventually the king was Elvis. And then after Elvis, you have who I don't even know who's on the strip now. You have Lady Gaga, Britney Spears, and all these names get forgotten. If it's not for the fact that Vegas has Sinatra names left and right when you go on these streets, and Sammy Davis Jr. Way and Dean Martin Drive, we really wouldn't know these people.
Wow. So you're not only articulate, educated, you should be able to sing.
I should be, but unfortunately, I didn't inherit the genes of my father.
So there you have it, folks. The S2 show missed out on the one trait.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was my dream growing up. I had two dreams growing up. So when I came to this country, and we were obviously illegal, so the main fear you have when you're illegal is you can't get caught. It's a big game of hide and seek.
Right.
And I had practice. At first, I would play hide and seek with my regular friends, and then when they would start counting, they count down 10, 9, 8, 7. By 6, I was already in my room, not even in the park, eating cereal, and just watching them count outside. And then they would eventually give up, and I realized, you know what? I think I'm in this for the long haul. I can probably get away without getting caught from the government for at least a good 10 years. And I exceeded my goal. It took about 20 years before I finally turned myself in, but for good reason. I actually became an American.
Outstanding. That's amazing, because it's very similar to me growing up. That big thing was not to be outside the house at 11 o'clock in Mississippi, or not be in the wrong place in Mississippi, because as a young African-American man, that was just the danger of being at the wrong place, the wrong time, and having the wrong things happen. So we still share some similarities.
What decade were you, what year, should we say, were you 11?
Oh, let's see, 1970, maybe around there, 71.
Okay, so this is post civil rights movement, but in the beginning of all the changes that were starting to take place.
Yeah.
Did you end up experiencing that forced? I know integration didn't really take place in the South until much later, but did you experience that while you were in public school?
Well, I mean, growing up in Mississippi, you always kind of were going through this post-civil rights, because Mississippi seemed to always, like I said, be in the limelight of Southern transgression. So my family grew up telling me about the South and all of the problems that were growing up. So I guess it was kind of baked into me that there were some problems that I needed to be aware of.
But when you were in school, was it segregated?
Yes, definitely.
So when did you ever have a white classmate before you graduated high school?
Oh yeah. We played this game where you would move the black kids to one neighborhood that used to be predominantly white, and then all of the white people that could afford to move out would move out. So only the poor white kids got stuck with a predominantly black class at that point.
Right.
Which was kind of weird, because we never really interacted with them as that much. I mean, you kind of got forced in a situation, forced on each other. So we found a way to interact comfortably without the drama that you sometimes see down south. We didn't have anybody screaming at us when we went to the schools, because there was so many of us bust in. The white people moved out.
Right. And I think that's common to most, even immigrants. When people come in from whatever country they come to, they tend to find either people that look like them or are going through something that they went through.
That's right.
And ironically, when actual Africans come from Africa, they have a hard time assimilating, because the parents and the families of the actual African kids, teenagers, don't necessarily want their children assimilating with anyone that isn't actually African.
Wow.
And I've experienced this. I've had several friends back in Florida. I have a friend who was Haitian, and she had a similar situation where her family didn't necessarily want her being around non-Haitians.
Yeah.
And for us Hispanics, it's very tricky, because being Hispanic just means you were conquered by the Spaniards. That's all it really means. However, it doesn't necessarily break down who you are.
Right.
You could be black. You could have been one of the ones that were brought through the slave trade and conquered at the same time. So you don't know whether you identify as a black person or as a Latino.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because my second lesson after I met my first Hispanic person was noticing that there were the color differences.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, so this guy can be Cuban and light.
Absolutely.
Or you could be Cuban and darker colored, but they didn't seem to have the same assimilation problems that we do here in the United States that you discussed about with the Haitian and the African American community.
Oh, yeah.
So going from there, how did that translate to you eventually making it into college?
Well, the thing was, when I grew up, while you're illegal, you have to obviously not get caught. So the one thing you're not allowed to do, you can't go to the hospital. That was the biggest fear we had. If you going to a hospital meant you're somehow documenting your existence. So when you got sick, Chris Rock always talks about it. It was like Robitussin. Well, that was kind of the medicine for us. If you got sick, it was we call it sana sana. And in Spanish, that means cure, or like nice. And what that does is you just sing a little song. You rub the wound, sana sana culito de rana. It's like you're rubbing a frog's ass, and that would be the translation. Wow. But it's like a lullaby you sing a kid. So kids just know when you're growing up, if you're illegal, you don't bitch about a broken arm. You just tough it out.
Right.
And that's the big divide between the Hispanic community, the illegal versus non-illegal. So the illegal ones are overcoming way more obstacles, and they have their backs against the wall, while the ones that are already legal become Americanized real quickly. And by becoming Americanized, that also means becoming spoiled, and all the things that if you've ever seen Chris Rock's stand-up, he talks about how when he went to a white friend's house and he heard his friend call his mom a bitch. And he was like, well, I can't call my mom a bitch. This doesn't fly in my house, right? Because Haley gets away with that. Haley can call her mom, fuck you, mom. And, she gets grounded because Haley luckily has a place to go be grounded at. Right. She has a room where she can repent.
Right.
When you grow up in the Latino, at least in the illegal Latino household, we don't have our own rooms. We don't have our own beds. No. You're sharing the bed with grandma, your mom, a cousin, maybe the neighbor, the homeless guy outside. So if that's the case, you can't get grounded. So you get your ass beat in front of everyone.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing because that's the same similar thing that I grew up with. Now, here we're talking about a generational gap between you and me, and I don't know of any black person I've ever heard say that they got away with calling their mom a bitch and still remembering that without recovering in the hospital.
No.
So it was like, I think I started to form the words, and then the next thing I know, I was waking up in the hospital.
Yeah.
So.
And I remember when I was a kid, my mom wouldn't say this, but I would hear all the other moms say when they were going to beat their kid, sometimes the kids would get a little smart because you go to school and you're around white kids, and then the American white kids, the privileged ones, they teach you their bad habits, and they're like, well, when my mom says she's gonna hit me, I just tell her I'm gonna call social services, and then and then you try that yourself. You're like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna try this one next time at home. Yeah. Oh, the minute you do that, your mom's like, well, great, I want to see you call, but until you make that phone call, and by the time they get here, take 15 minutes to arrive, there won't be anybody to recover. Yeah. And you're like, what? Let me backtrack on that.
Yeah, I think it was even harder to call social services at our time because they would have used the phone to beat you with, so you would have been like not even able to speak to social services when they came there. It's generationally different, and not only that, you got spanked at home, you got spanked by your neighbors, you got spanked at school.
Yeah,
you got multiple spankings, so we were kind of beat into oppression.
And don't forget about the spankings in the grocery store. That's a thing about that I noticed.
You went in a grocery store?
Luckily, they had those when I was around. Yes.
No, we had them. We were never allowed to go in the grocery store. My mom had 4 kids, so she was not carrying 4 kids in the grocery store. We sat in the car with the windows down in Mississippi. Oof. True fun.
But you know what? That makes sense. It's very intelligent on your mom's point, because if you all go in there and you all point something out that you like, you're all going to want something. Exactly. It's a very economical choice your mom made.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you this. So you grew up in the South. Now, did you grow up in a typical 2-parent household, or was it a 1-parent household?
Oh, no. It's also similar. I grew up in a single family home, raised by my mom, who I love dearly, who passed away 2016. Raised 4 kids, 3 boys, 1 girl. My dad left us where they basically got divorced when I was 7 years old, so I never really actually got a chance to know my father.
Were you the oldest or the youngest?
I am the oldest.
The oldest of
right.
4?
Of 4.
And you were the only boy?
No, it's 3 boys, 1 girl.
3 boys, 1 girl. I'm sorry. Okay. And when you grew up, who filled that role of a father's point of view? Not necessarily that did your mom compensate, but was there a male figure that you either looked up to or provided some sort of support?
Without a doubt. There were definitely male figures. I had great grandparents. My grandfather was a strong male role model. But I also had, like I said, at that time, there was a neighborhood raised a child. That's something that I think that's missing now. We had a community, so it was a community that raised them. So there were a lot of men that I had to look up, a lot of positive role models that I wanted to emulate, which is, I think, missing nowadays. Kids don't have that benefit of being raised by the community.
I agree. And that's a very important role for a boy growing up.
Can I pose that same question to you, sir? Who were your role models?
Well, kind of like you, I had this huge admiration for my mom, and I really resented the fact that she didn't have any help. So whenever I would meet grown men that were father-like roles that I considered to be admirable, I really had like a strong bond with. And the one that I think affected me the most at that time was my bus driver. My bus driver, we actually rode on not the big yellow buses, but not the short one either. But they had those private buses that were like cargo vans. I mean, I was special, but in a different way.
Right.
And those cargo vans maybe fit like 15 kids in there. And the bus driver, he had an admiration and respected. He was a married man, but he respected my mom's struggle. So he would like circulate around the block, around the whole neighborhood for 2 or 3 hours longer than needed, just to allow either my mom or my sister to come home to take care of me because there was nobody at my house.
That's cool.
And in the meantime, the guy would take me to cafeterias. And see, in Miami, we have cafeterias are like the corner store, where you have one everywhere. And in those cafeterias, you can get the same items that you can get in any Latin American country. So it's like the convenience of having 27 countries or something in one location. And he would take me there, and he would introduce me to different foods from different countries. And he was a Colombian man, and he would buy me Colombian delicacies. And for my birthday, he would give me gifts. He would buy me like chess games, puzzle games, things to make my brain stronger, I guess.
Wow. And
I valued that because he was investing in my intelligence. And he's the first person to give me a job. When I was 9 years old, he gave me an opportunity during the summer for a week to pass out flyers for his bus company. And obviously, looking back on it, it's child labor laws, but that's not the way that I saw it.
Oh, no.
He paid me $20 a day, and I passed out flyers with him maybe for 3 hours. And then he'd take me to McDonald's and buy me a Happy Meal. When you're a boy, going to McDonald's, and when you're a poor boy, that's expensive.
Oh, yeah.
So I valued that there was a man stepping in that role. And I felt like I learned a lot of life lessons from him. So sometimes it goes to show you, our heroes don't have to be Michael Jordan. They don't have to be Dr. Dre or, whatever rapper or singer or whatever's popular. It could be people around the block, the neighbor.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing that you share that story because I had a guy across the street in my neighborhood who also took a active role in my life, which I couldn't understand because he was married also. He didn't have anything to do with my mom. And but he also got me a job, and it just shows you that role that people can play, men can play in other people's lives if they will allow that. And I guess that's one of the things that's missing nowadays is that I don't know if there's that sense of community or trust anymore. Like now I think if you took an active role or involved in somebody's kids, they might actually call the cops on you nowadays. Like,
yeah,
why does this strange man keep hanging around my son or my daughter,
I would say it's different times because even though I'm younger than you are. We're a generation apart in essence.
Oh, without doubt.
I feel so much closer to your experiences in your generation than I do with the students that I teach who, in theory, are the same age difference than the two of us are.
Right.
And that's because, I guess, obviously technology and social media has a lot to do with the way kids are being raised. A lot of times, I call the iPad, for example, a lazy parent's best friend. Because if you got a kid who's just, doesn't really want to participate or do something, you just give them an iPad, you shut them up for a couple minutes.
That's interesting. Your generation, because I'm 10 years old, what was the babysitting service?
We didn't have one yet. So my generation was we were the first generation to get technology and the last one to be raised without it.
I sense some disagreement in the studio.
Well, it's biased, just biased.
We had TV. Here's the bad thing. My generation, TV went off at 11 o'clock. So, and TV really wasn't that entertaining. We had cartoons that came either, I think it's usually on Saturdays. And then you had Kung Fu Theater at some little bit. And then all of a sudden you would hear this national anthem playing at 11 o'clock at night. You knew the TV went off. So I think this generation would freak out if the internet or TV went off. So you had to be more creative. You had to be involved in each other, into friends, into the neighborhood, into that, that sense of community. And I think maybe if there's anything this generation should have passed along to this generation is maybe that need to contact.
Well, here's the thing also. With my generation, it's not to say that my generation per se didn't have access to these things. It's that I am a subgroup of my generation. So I was on the poorest extreme. So maybe the neighbors, well, maybe not my neighbors, but maybe a couple blocks away, there were some neighbors who probably had cable. But
yeah.
in my time, I remember growing up, not only without cable, it was with that antenna that you actually had to have one of the family members hold, and we would take turns. We'd all sit on the couch, and my sisters would take turn, and they would each hold it for about 10 minutes until the next commercial break. And then we just rotate. And then it was my turn to hold the antenna. So it may seem like a story of an 80-year-old that I'm saying, but, for someone who's...
That's funny.
I'm 33, and I was the antenna holder,
Wow.
So it all varies. What I think technology has done is made things more affordable and accessible for everyone. So now nobody has to go through any kind of struggle.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with that. I think the other thing, too, is that it's not only affordable, it's more accessible.
Accessible.
Yeah, like I said, my generation, it was like people, I remember when cable TV came on, and people, it was like 24-hour TV. That was
For
like,
what? We're sleeping 8 of them.
And I can think it was years after I left home before my mom had 24-hour cable TV and CNN and all of these other things. And then at that same time, we got exposed to MTV, which I fell in love with. It was like music videos all the time, TV all the time. And still, we were still on the cusp of technology changing because we had went from VCRs to DVDs to this TV phenomenon. But like I said, I just never got addicted to it. I think that was the biggest thing.
Now, let me ask you this. You have had the luxury to travel to many, many different places, countries, cities, due to your job. What are some things that you've noticed that when you come back, you either A, take for granted as an American, or 2, maybe have a little resentment or anger towards Americans who don't appreciate what they have?
Take for granted. What do I take for granted?
Or what are you most grateful for, I should say, when you leave the country and you come back?
That's interesting.
Because you just came back from South Korea not too long ago, right?
Yeah. For those who have traveled, I noticed when I went abroad, you actually got treated a little bit better.
Yeah.
Which was weird than coming back to the United States and not being treated like that. So I don't know that I took anything for granted because of the way I was raised. So I always had this appreciation for every new experience, every new learning opportunity in every country I traveled to. That was an opportunity to learn something new and bring that into my environment. So I don't know that when I came back, I felt like I lost something or I missed something. I felt like I was bringing something back that I never had exposure to. Like I said, the first time meeting my first Hispanic person.
Okay, so yeah, it gave you maybe an opportunity to meet different cultures?
A broad brush, yes. Something I didn't have the opportunity to do in Mississippi because the states always seem to be too focused on who we are, or what we are, not who we are.
See, in my case, when we moved here in 92, and I didn't become a citizen until 2016. So we're talking about almost a 20-year gap before I actually felt American. Because the whole time, even though I spoke better English than I even did Spanish, I knew the Star Spangled Banner better than I knew my own national anthem. For all practical purposes, I was American. But there was just something about not fitting in. There was something about, I feel like I'm a target. And that didn't change until recently. And not fully. I mean, I still have my issues, so don't get me wrong. But I had the luxury of growing up in a very multicultural city. Because in Miami, you have all sorts of Latino backgrounds from all possibility of Latino countries. So you can speak Spanish, but at the same time be friends with people from maybe 15 different countries. And it gives you a new perspective. And then you start to meet people from non-Hispanic countries. So I always felt like, I had it figured out. There's no need for me to travel. I already met all the people here. What's the point? Until I finally did. And obviously for legal purposes, I couldn't leave the country. But when I got the chance to and I traveled all over the world, that was when I realized what I took most for granted and the thing that I'm so fortunate for is a toilet.
A toilet.
Have you had to shit? Oh, I'm sorry. Have you had a chance to defecate into a cylindrical hole in the ground?
There were some opportunities. Unfortunately, I bypassed on those because I didn't want to. And fortunately for me, there were always great toilet facilities in every country. The one thing I was shocked by is that both Japan and Korea had electronic toilets before any other country. That I never saw an electronic toilet until I went to those countries.
Did it have a bidet?
It did.
Wow. Did you use it?
I did not. I was not comfortable enough to expose my rear end to the bidet. I didn't even know what the bidet was supposed to do, so there was this sense of wonderment as I was sitting there looking at all of these buttons and electronics.
Yeah. And then you're afraid it's going to feel too good, and then there's no turning back.
Yeah, obviously. And, you
then
don't want to get addicted to something that you don't want to buy when you get back to the United States.
Then you have to buy a sprinkling system.
Exactly.
I understand. Well, for me, it was the toilet as well as air conditioning. Central air conditioning.
That I did miss. I'm glad you actually bring that up. I did miss central air conditioning.
Yeah, it's incredible how you can grow up in a country for so long, and we forget how lucky we are to be living in this country. I mean, the United States, say what you want about it, there are a lot of bad things to complain about, but we have access to some of the most convenient and comfortable features that other people in the globe do not have.
Yes.
I mean, we complain here. We actually get on our high horse and talk about water not being clean enough.
Yeah.
Where we have water.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many countries that the sewage from these holes that these people have to go defecate in, you know, it starts to rain, it fills up, and then that sewage runs into the rivers and contaminates their drinking water.
That is true. Now, when I went to Korea the first time, one of the things they told us when we traveled apart as military guys was don't drink water off the base because they did not have potable water everywhere. So we had to be careful of that. And when I went to Italy, the one thing I noticed more than anything is that they did not use window screens.
You're right. But if you notice, they also don't have the bugs that we have here.
True. I just wasn't comfortable without a window.
You may not be comfortable, but you grew up in the South, and Florida is very similar to Louisiana and Mississippi and Jackson.
We had windows.
So you had bugs. You had mosquitoes all night. You have roaches. And you hear them, the crickets at night. You don't really hear that in some of these countries. That's why there's no need for screens.
True that. In
fact, where I'm from, I mean, it used to be a common way of thinking of old people. They would say they were so proud of being Chilean because the city that they lived in, it was so nice that it didn't require air conditioning, which is it's a load of shit. Obviously, it did require it, but people just got accustomed to, we're better than air conditioning because we don't need it. But once you have air conditioning in your life, it's very hard to go back.
Okay.
So I wanted to run a few things by you. I want you to tell the people who are listening to, what are some things that you would like to share or promote? What is the purpose of this show? It's a talk show, but what are we trying to accomplish?
Growth, conversation, thought outside one's own circles. I think that's one of the things right now that I feel like I really got from my mom was the need to want to learn more. I think within any community, not just the African American community or Hispanic community, there should always be a need to question things. You know, even if you grew up a certain way, you want to question and at least be able to learn and adapt. By that learning it to adapt, you can find success. So I think that's one of the things that I like about the show when you approached it to me was we were going to have this opportunity to speak to our communities, our prospective communities about things that we think are important, things that they may want to consider, and things that may help them grow and overcome the situation and circumstances that they're in.
Well said. Now, if I had to ask you, what is one thing that you find is perhaps a problem affecting our communities, the black, the brown, the underprivileged, underrepresented, disenfranchised? What is something that you perhaps could give your expertise or shed a little light on some things we can change as people per se?
Well, I'm going to say the first, I would say it would be access, but I don't believe it's access. I believe it's knowledge of the information that they may need to overcome some situations. I find that the school system doesn't really provide them the answers that they need to overcome. Like I find that they may teach them math, but they may not teach them how to balance a checkbook. May not teach them about financial credit and things like that. So what I'm finding in the community is that there are opportunities and things that people don't even learn about credit scores until they've ruined their credit.
You're
they
right.
don't learn about birth control until they actually
have a baby.
Yeah. So I think if there's anything, it's access to the information, not access to the organization. You know, I think that there's always an organization out there, but the information is not getting down to them.
Okay, so let me ask you, of the following things, what would you rate as a top priority within our communities? Unemployment, education, credit scores? Which one do you think, or sexual responsibility? What would be a top notch?
Education. I think education is the start of everything. My mom was a teacher, and maybe I could be wrong. I think your teachers can't be the only source of that. And that, again, like you said, we both had outside influences. And that education doesn't have to always come from a book, but it needs to be somebody that you will let speak into you, some knowledge that will put you on the road. So even if it's like, hey, let me teach you about how to improve your credit score. Let me teach you about what it is to be sexually active, I mean, because it's more to having sex than just making babies, what I mean? So I think there just needs to be this conversation, and maybe that should be it. There should be the conversations being had.
Well, what do you say to, now this is coming from obviously a teacher's perspective, but what would you say to all the parents throughout the country who are completely against having any kind of sexual education in the schools?
You got two ways for your kid to learn. They're going to learn it from you, or they're going to learn it from their friends. And what I found is when your friends are teaching you, if it ain't a teacher and it ain't you, your friends teaching you, and the lessons you learn from your friends are usually the wrong lessons, and they come around too late. And at that point, now you're entering a place that you probably are not ready for, becoming a parent, And I think that's the one thing that ruins it for a lot of communities, is that they have to become parents well before they're ready. And somebody should be speaking to that.
Right. Now, by no means do I want anyone to get the wrong idea. I would say you and I, we would describe ourselves as nowhere close to being millionaires. We are not the epitome of success. We are not making this show to in any way to showcase anything that we may have.
No.
It's actually the opposite. It's to show that, yeah, we're nowhere near the top. In fact, all of us can collectively say we're closer to the bottom than anything, but we accomplished something that was probably not expected, and that is we broke the cycle of poverty within each of our families.
Right.
You did it with your generation, I did it for mine, and then for my future generation, that's hopefully going to benefit. And what we would like to do is promote some of the things that worked for us, give pointers, take questions from people, because unfortunately, the two of us, a lot of times we probably had no one to turn to for some of these questions and guidance. We kind of had to figure it out on our own. We had to wing it. And I guess we want to use this as a platform to promote good social causes in order to empower the underrepresented, the kids who don't have a role model, the kid who doesn't have a parent at home, the boy who needs a father figure or just wants to ask a basic question about their credit. It's also for women to call and get a perspective from a man about how we might see a certain issue, maybe because they don't have access to a man they trust that they can have this conversation with.
That's right. I agree with that. And going along those same guidelines, what do you feel were some of the things that helped you to, we know that you're leaving the area and being able to go to school, but like I said, without that, there's something else that had to be there to help you to navigate those things.
Well, in my case, I was the only boy of the family, and I was the youngest. So my two sisters, who were not just older than me, they were a lot older than me. There were about 6-7 year gap between each of us. So when I came, I was a little kid. I was 6 years old, 5.5 years old. My oldest sister was about to turn 18. So there were different priorities. My oldest sister didn't get the benefit of getting educated by the American public school system. My sister, who was at 12 at the time, she got half. She got half of her experience here, half of it in the country. Didn't truly get the opportunity to just take advantage of the American public school system, whereas I was the youngest, and I saw that as my golden ticket at a very young age. And that's something that's very rare, and I don't really see that. Now that I am a teacher and I am an educator, it's rare to find a kid who sees school as their golden ticket.
Oh, yeah.
That is never the case now. It's always they have pipe dreams of either being a famous basketball player,
singer,
they're going to be a singer, a rapper, an actress, or the new one, right? Everybody's going to be a social media star, an influencer. That's the new one, or a YouTube makeup artist. They have all these goals, and I'm not saying they're not going to accomplish some of them, but mathematically speaking, I teach math. The probability of this happening is significantly lower than if they were to just embrace the concept of school, all subjects, and just go to college the traditional way. It could change a generation. Yeah. So that's something that I saw because I was very grateful for the country and the opportunity that it gave me. The fact that schools had air conditioning here, well, I was already very happy. The second thing that I noticed right off the bat was we had free lunch. The cafeteria had food. In other countries, you bring your own food. First of all, there's no public school. You pay for school. You pay for your uniform. You pay for your books. And then on top of that, you got to bring your own food.
Wow.
If you don't have food, you don't eat. It's that simple. Right. So here, the fact that schools offer the food, it was mind-boggling to me to see that kids didn't eat the food. Yeah. And that's where my anger began. I had a lot of childhood resentment towards my own generation.
Once again, generational. Growing up, when I grew up, food was a huge thing because my mom had 4 kids. So She didn't always have a chance to buy cereal or
Right.
biscuits. So the fact that you could get a school lunch, school breakfast was tremendous, and that was one of the benefits that she was able to get because of her salary. She didn't qualify for food stamps, but she did qualify for the food assistance programs at the school.
The reduced lunch.
Yes, the reduced lunches.
Right. And my mom actually qualified for the free one, which I was very grateful for, and I took advantage of. Not only did I eat there, I would stock up my backpack with all the things that the other kids would leave behind on the tables.
Wow.
And I would stand by the trash can when they would go take their tray, and I would point at things. Are you going to eat that? Are you going to have that? Are you going to eat that? And then when they would tell me no, I'd be like, let me have that. And I would fill my backpack, take that food home, and this is where I felt like an old man. I would go home and be like, all right, food is served. And I would bring it and actually put it in the fridge, and I knew that cereal that I took was going to be my older sister's breakfast the next day. The milks were going to go to my middle-aged sister, and then the fruit, my mom would take it on the bus when she would go to clean her houses. So everything had like a sense of family and community, and I felt like I was actively contributing. Even though I was 6 or 7 years old, it felt like I had a purpose, and that's I think what I had that many other kids may have not had a chance to have. Purpose. And we don't give kids purpose these days. We just treat them as like human pets until they become a certain age and start asking questions.
Purpose. I don't know. I think nowadays it seems, at least to me, that parents have overcome a situation. Say they grew up like we did grew up. And some parents say, well, I don't want my kids to experience what I experienced. What they forgot is that what they experienced gave them a little bit of that hunger.
Absolutely.
And when kids don't have that hunger, then they grow up with expectations of what life is supposed to present to them. Whereas we grew up knowing that life didn't present you those opportunities and those things, like taking advantage of free food.
Right.
You know, like I said, there just wasn't going to be food when you got home. And with 4 kids in the house or a number of people eating that food, the competition for food was there.
Yeah.
So if you didn't eat, when we grew up, it was like, if you don't eat what was put on the table, you wasn't eating.
Yep.
So, like I said, your next opportunity to eat was going to be maybe at school or at
Yep.
that lunchtime. And again, I think now that America is more, I hate to say wealthy, but we are one of the wealthier countries, I think that there's just this thing where people don't view those things as benefits. They see them as, oh, that's the expectation.
Yeah.
You know, and it's weird because you have to explain to people, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way. Poverty in the United States is
not the
Not
poverty
the-
worldwide.
Yes.
If you're poor here, it is a luxury.
Yeah.
Compared to being poor in the third world.
You can be poor here and have a phone.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that we're in any way, making it seem like poverty isn't real. Or no, that's not what we're saying. It's just they're two different
things.
categorical
Yeah.
issues.
Even if you go to like an advanced country like Korea or Japan, poverty there, I mean, when they say that someone's poor there, they literally have no social network to help them. There's no free food.
You reminded me of a story that I haven't really shared much, but when I was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was really interested in what this professor in Harvard who has a show now, Dr. Louis Henry Gates, I believe his name, and he had a special at the time where he discussed the differences of being black in different countries, of what it's like to grow up black in the U.S., black in Peru, it's called Black in Latin America.
Wow.
And I saw one episode one day, and it was about what it's like to grow up black in Haiti versus the Dominican Republic. 2 countries it's one island, and they share a border.
Wow.
And I had a chance to go to the Dominican Republic. And that man was in the back of my brain. I was like, you know what? I'm already here. I need to explore this. How can I do this? So I rented a motorcycle, and I just went about maybe 4 or 5 hours east, and I got to the border with Haiti. And I had watched the special, so I knew the significance of that border and of that river. It's called the Massacre River because many wars were fought between the 2 nations because one nation was proud to be black and the other nation was trying to hide their black identity.
Wow.
And when I went there, it was for like self-growth. But what I didn't expect was when I arrived, the border had already closed. And mind you, I just rode a rented motorcycle, 5 hours. I had a sunburn. And then I was not going to accept not getting into Haiti. I needed to see this. So I just went up to the guard and I said, I'm trying to get through. Here's my passport. And he says, oh, the border's closed. You have to come back tomorrow. I was like, oh, man. And then as I'm walking back to my motorcycle, another guard was like, don't worry. Like, just go around over here. The river's over there. Just cross in and you're fine. I was like, okay, this is very contradicting, but okay. So I went to the river. And as I approached the river, I was approached by no less than about 16 Haitian men, all offering to take me on their shoulder so that I don't get wet.
Wow.
And I was a little bit taken back because I wanted to cross and I didn't mind, but I didn't really speak French Creole and the Spanish that I spoke, they didn't understand. So it was one of these language barriers. And then it kind of just turned into they all just started carrying me. And I didn't know what to do. So I was okay. And they started telling me prices. And I was like, no, don't worry. And then they started fighting with each other over what the equivalent would have been about 5 American cents. That's when I got to the other side. And I just felt so sad and guilty that I kind of exploited these people. And it's not that I wanted to. It all happened so fast. And I started handing out the money. They were all like coming at me for 5 cents. And I was like, no, I can give you more than that. I gave them the equivalent of to what would have been maybe $2 or $3 a piece. Because that's all that I had on me. But then my passport gets taken by an official on the other side and says that in order for me to get it back, I have to pay him $50 or go to Haitian jail.
My goodness.
And then this is giving me a whole different perspective. Now I'm feeling like, what did I just get myself into? So naturally, as an economist, I had to bargain with the guy. I took out a 20 and said that's all I had. And he said, no, 30. I gave him 30, even though I had the money. But he gave me the passport back. And then on the way back, I had the same issue. I got approached by a different group of Haitian men, carried me over. And that's when I witnessed for the first time the true necessity of just despair, of how poor some countries really are in the world and how they would trade anything to be poor in America. And that's where you get that whole mindset, that hunger mindset. Now that Kobe passed, we use that Mamba mentality and think of it like as if it's a sports.
Yeah, but you're right.
It's not sports related. That Mamba mentality
it's a drive.
It's a drive. It's a drive for I am not going to accept the status quo. I'm tired of being poor. I'm tired of being hungry, and I want to make that change.
Which is a great segue. Is that what you would say contributed to your continuing? Like we said, neither one of us are financially millionaires, but you're doing very well. And would you say what has allowed you to continue to be on that road of success?
Well, I would say is I saw all my mom's mistakes. So the one thing she did really well was love us and always be employed. She always had multiple jobs, but the one thing she couldn't do was budget correctly. She had no sense of budgeting, no sense of timing. And when it came to paying bills, everything was late. So my whole childhood was either taking showers in the dark or eating with a candle. Everything was related to the light was getting cut off, the phone was getting cut off, or either the rent was overdue. And that's one thing that I couldn't really help her out as a child. All I can do is tell her, here's a reminder. So as I got older, my goal was to one day make every responsible decision so that I never have to put myself in any of those situations.
Outstanding.
And I think that's actually more than anything what contributed to me having good credit, having good employment, and eventually, going to college and making the right decisions. And I think that's what I want you to share from your perspective. What are the right decisions you made along the way to get you where you are?
Well, I'm going to say that it's equal parts. There was a song by this group. I can't think of their name, but they would talk about what makes success, and they would say 20% this, 20% that.
Oh, yes.
10%. I'll think of the song at some time. But I think there's a hunger that we both have talked about. There's a hunger to want to overcome. There's a drive that was necessary. The drive was motivated by the situation and circumstances that I had to. So joining the military was step one. Getting an education was step two. And again, I had my mom as a role model. And then step three was, learning from the mistakes that I saw, not just from my mom, but mistakes I saw friends make. I had friends that didn't join the military that decided not to go to school, decided to chase the college basketball, and that didn't pan out. So I felt like I was fortunate in that. I was also fortunate that some earlier sexual encounters didn't turn into babies.
That's correct.
Because I think that's one of the other things that push you on the road to poverty. If you don't get a chance to actually get out there and seek that hunger and find your drive and get that goal, accomplish those goals, then you may be halted in doing that. So I just think that was the thing. It was a necessary hunger that was in me that needed to be filled.
You mentioned something that I guess may have some luck to do with it, and that is not becoming a parent sooner than you need to be.
Oh, yeah.
And that's probably the one thing we can attribute to all the global issues.
Yeah.
The overpopulation in the world, the lack of resources, the pollution, the lack of recycling, the contamination. It's all attributed to unplanned parenting.
Yeah.
And how can that be tackled?
Again, education. Again, like I said, I think it was treated as a taboo when I was growing up. But, now with the internet and access to the information, there's no reason not to. And like I said, I try to have a conversation with any young man, any young woman that will listen now, to let them know that, look, there's always going to be an opportunity to have sex. There would never not be an opportunity. But the chance to not be a parent, if you ain't playing with that, look, you can be a parent quicker than you were ever prepared for, and that changes the game. All of a sudden, you're in a new dynamic that you didn't want to be in. So be educated, be smart, and have a hunger.
Now, the issue also comes in where when you start making one mistake, it unfortunately tends to be a ripple effect and creates just a slippery slope of mistake after mistake after mistake.
Yep.
And then where do you draw that line? When is it? Because from what I've gathered, it seems women are far more resilient than men at times. They tend to draw a line in the sand somewhere. Sometimes it takes having a child, maybe 2 or 3, but that's when they fight or they stand up, and then they kind of act as the role models. Yeah. But how can we avoid having it to get to so many mistakes to create that sense of awareness?
Wow. How? Again, get the information out through platforms like this, through platforms that will speak to our communities. And instead of focusing on things that don't provide information and knowledge, we need to have more platforms that do provide information and knowledge. And maybe we need to do it in a more entertaining way. Maybe it's got to be through rap music. Maybe it's got to be through celebrities, or maybe it's just got to be through communities again.
Now, it's funny you say that because both of us kind of dabble in comedy. Even though we're professionals, we were smart enough to not quit our day job, right? We actually believe in the importance of having a 401k and having a retirement account and, having a health care. But at the same time, we're pretty fun people, and we like to entertain. It's a matter of finding a balance between making people feel comfortable and entertained while at the same time actually providing some sort of guidance.
Yeah.
Because once you start popping out kids, your life is no longer about you. It's about these kids, and then that's when the kids start making the same mistake that the parents made.
Yeah.
So with that said, what are some thoughts that you have or that you're looking forward to the future of this show? Some issues that you want to tackle?
Well, I hope to be able to provide some information to those communities out there, to those people out there that are interested, to both our communities, providing access to the information, maybe even providing a source of where they can find it, not only just listening to me, but at least giving them platforms or access to the information where I got it. Like, how do you start the road to improving your credit, and what are the things that I need to be talking to my son, and how do we find these people that may want to be positively involved in that? And I think that's one of the things that we can do, starting with this community and using this platform. And thanks to you, I think we're on the right track.
Well, I hope so. I really hope. And the goals that I have for us and for the show is, here's some things that I want to address to give you a little sneak peek going forward, so you can tune in. I want to discuss at some point in some of the shows. I want to address men. I want to talk about manhood. I want to talk about the importance of how should I say it? Wearing a condom. You always get the how do you call it? The people tend to not want to for several reasons, but one of the funny ones I always hear is, man, my dick's too big, right?
Right.
And I remember when I was in high school, I used to be an HIV peer educator, and I would grab a condom and put it on my fist and shove it all the way down to my elbow. And I was like, listen, man, if you're bigger than that, you got bigger problems than sex right now, okay? Right. So I think that's one of the things we want to talk about going towards the future. I also want to talk about the importance of, should you become a father, whether it's planned or not, the importance of being a good one, right? A present one.
Yeah.
And then that's something we want to definitely discuss. I also want to talk about how men in our cultures tend to have anger issues, and they do not get along with any form of authority.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, whatever the authority source is, we will always resent the authority, but there are times that we also need to learn how to cooperate with authority. Right. Because maybe sometimes we can avoid problems.
Right.
And I also want to at some point talk about women's issues. I would like to bring in guests from women's perspectives on the issues that women are facing today.
Hey, I think hopefully when we get to the women's issues, we'll be able to bring in Carice as well.
Oh, absolutely. We'll bring the founder of the station and get a perspective from a fresher, a fresher look.
Yeah, that mind and that voice that we want to hear from.
Yeah, and ultimately, whether we talk about this or that, we definitely want to talk about the importance of budgeting. And this is our big thing where you and I tend to see eye to eye. It's okay to not keep it real. It's okay to keep a job. it's okay to hate your job, and it's okay to plan for the future. And I think that's something that we definitely want to discuss. And I'm very happy that you decided to join and start this venture with me. And we're gonna have a lot going forward. Anything else that you want to?
No, I'm
point
equally happy, man. I appreciate you extending the opportunity. I'm equally happy that eCareers put this platform out here so that all communities can get this information, can have access to information, and also see what a great role model she is to the city of Las Vegas, and to other women out there. If you have not gotten a chance to meet this young lady, please get down here, support 72.5, support Sanchez and Slaughter, S2, and all the other platforms that are going on out there. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of access.
To back you up on that, that's going to be pretty much wrapping up our show and our segment for today. You have been listening to the Minority Report by Sanchez and Slaughter, and we look forward to listening or having you listen to us every Wednesday from 5 till 6 p.m.